The first Congress of the United States wrote silver's value into federal law before it had a navy, before it had a national road, almost before it had a country. That law set a yardstick for how gold and silver relate to each other, and it did not pull the yardstick out of thin air. It drew it from the ground itself, from the rough proportion at which the two metals actually come out of the earth. And if you own silver right now, here is what that old yardstick is quietly telling you. Silver is stretched further from its founding anchor than almost any living owner has ever had the chance to buy it. That is the gap the title is talking about, and I am not going to make you wait for the answer. Yes, it is confirmed, and yes, if you own silver, you are early. Not early like a rumor, early like a measurement. The gap is the relationship between gold and silver, the ratio between them. And in this latest stretch, gold has run hard, while silver has lagged behind it, which means the gap between the two metals widened out yet again. The financial channels read that as a verdict against silver. In my years in the gold and silver world, I have learned to read it the other way. A stretched ratio has never been silver's obituary. It has been silver's coiled spring. Stay with me, because before we are done, I am going to show you exactly why the spring is wound tighter now than the people paid to talk about money will ever admit on air. Here is the piece of history most people were never taught. When the Young Republic passed its Coinage Act in 1792, it defined the dollar itself in silver and fixed the official relationship between the two monetary metals at roughly 15 ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold, 15 to 1. That number was not a politician's guess. It sat close to the natural abundance of the metals, close to how miners actually found them, and close to where the great trading nations of Europe had settled for centuries. Silver was not gold's poor cousin in that world. Silver was money, by statute, struck at the first mint in Philadelphia. Now hold that ancient yardstick up against the modern one. In this stretch, it takes several times that founding proportion, on the order of 4 to 5 times it, to trade your way from silver into gold. Same two metals, same crust of the same earth. A relationship that law and nature once agreed belonged near 15 has been stretched into the 60s and beyond. Either the founders and the geologists were wildly wrong about silver, or the modern prices. I want you to meet somebody, because a measurement does not have a face until a person holds it. Picture a retired high school math teacher from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Call him Dale. 3 decades in the same classroom, teaching proportions and ratios to teenagers who mostly wanted to be somewhere else. Red pen in his shirt pocket, a habit of checking every answer twice before he trusted it. Dale has a 401k he built one modest contribution at a time, and when his neighbor mentioned the gold-silver ratio at a church supper, Dale did what a career of teaching ratios trains a man to do. He went home and set up the proportion himself, on paper, the long way. And what he found stopped him cold. Because Dale has spent his whole life telling kids that when a ratio gets far enough away from its baseline, something in the equation has to move. He just never expected the equation to be about his own retirement. So let us do what Dale did and actually understand the machine, because expertise is knowing the mechanism, not just the slogan. The gold-silver ratio is simply how many ounces of silver 1 ounce of gold will buy. When the ratio is high, silver is historically cheap relative to gold. When it compresses, silver is catching up, and it never catches up gently. At the peak of the Great Metals Mania in 1980, the ratio compressed to around 17, within sight of the founder's yardstick. By the early 1990s, it had blown out to around 100. In the panic of 2020, it spiked to roughly 125, the most extreme reading in the entire history of the measurement, and then it snapped back violently as silver nearly doubled off its low in a matter of months. That is the signature this measurement leaves every single time. It stretches slowly, for years, while everyone forgets about silver. Then it closes fast, in months, while everyone scrambles to remember it. But here is where it gets strange, and this is the part that should have your full attention. In the current stretch, gold has been the star. Central banks bidding, debt fears building, gold pressing record territory in the low to mid 4,000s after a powerful run. Silver participated, built a long base, worked its way into the low 60s, and then lagged badly on gold's latest leg, so the ratio widened back out. The financial media treats that divergence as silver failing. History treats it as silver loading. Go back to the 1970s, the greatest precious metals bull market of the modern era. Silver spent the early years of that decade trailing gold, the disappointing little brother, the metal the smart-sounding people had written off. Then in the final stretch, silver did in months what gold had needed years to do, outran gold entirely, and drove the ratio down towards 17. The lag was not the end of silver's story. The lag was the setup for its best chapter. And that is not even the biggest piece. The biggest piece is what has been happening to the actual metal while the price went sideways. The world has now run a structural silver deficit for multiple years in a row, year after year of humanity consuming more silver than every mine on the planet produces, with the shortfall quietly bled out of above-ground stockpiles that took generations to build. Think about what that means. Every solar panel, every advanced chip, every electric vehicle draws on silver, and most of that industrial silver is scattered across landfills in quantities too small to ever economically recover. Gold gets locked in vaults and stays there for centuries. Silver gets used up a few grams at a time and is gone. Meanwhile, the visible inventories the market leans on, the registered metal at the COMEX in New York, the free-floating bars in London's vaults, have been drawn down, and Asian buyers have at times paid stubborn premiums over Western prices to pull physical bars east. A deficit like that does not care about a quarter's headlines. It is a slow-motion squeeze on the one thing paper markets pretend is infinite, the metal itself. Now, if that deficit is the strongest single fact in this whole story, and I believe it is, then this is the natural moment to tell you what I put together, because understanding a squeeze and acting on it are two different things. My family and I assembled the free retirement wealth protection guide for exactly this situation. It is written for American retirees with $100,000 or more in a retirement account, and it walks you through how people in that position diversify a portion of their hard-earned savings into physical gold and silver inside the account they already have, without taxes and without penalties, using what is called a self-directed precious metals IRA. This is not just for insiders or the wealthy. If you have $100,000 or more in any retirement account, a 401k, an IRA, an old plan from a job you left years ago, this is for you. It comes from our family to yours. No obligation, nothing to buy. If you are watching this on your TV, just scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to readfamilyguide.com. Get it, read it, and then come right back, because the next part is the part that big banks genuinely do not want held up to the light. Here it is. The silver price you see quoted is not set by people trading silver. It is set overwhelmingly by people trading paper promises of silver, futures contracts, and claims that outnumber the deliverable ounces behind them many times over. Layered on top of that, a small handful of large banks has historically held a heavily concentrated short position in COMEX silver, a structural lien against the price by the very institutions that profit from your churn, your fear, and your panic selling. Most of the time, the paper tail wags the metal dog, but rare moments of stress tear the mask off. In the panic of March 2020, the price of gold in New York futures ripped apart from the price of real bars in London. Planes were chartered to fly metal across the Atlantic. Vault managers scrambled. For a brief window, the world saw plainly that a paper claim and a bar in your hand are not the same thing and never were. Those splits are rare, but they are the tell. When the deficit finally bites hard enough, it is the paper price that breaks toward the metal, not the other way around. Ask yourself why you have never heard the founding yardstick discussed on a financial network. It is not because the ratio is a secret. Dale found it in one evening with a pencil. It is because the entire modern machinery of Wall Street earns its living on the other side of your attention. Trading desks make money on your churn. Brokerages make money keeping your savings inside their products. A retiree who understands that silver sits at a multiple of its natural historical relationship to gold and quietly repositions a portion of his account into physical metal and then does nothing for years is the worst customer that machine has ever seen. Nobody runs a commercial for the client who stops trading. So the silence around this measurement is not evidence it does not matter. The silence is the business model. Now watch what happens when you widen the lens beyond silver, because gold is telling you who already believes this. Central banks, the least excitable buyers on earth, purchased metal at a pace exceeding 1,000 tons a year for 3 consecutive years, roughly twice their pace of the prior decade. And though the tempo has cooled, it remains historically elevated. Along the way, gold overtook the euro to become the second largest reserve asset held by the world's central banks, behind only the dollar. And notice when the buying accelerated. Right after major Western governments froze another nation's currency reserves. Every central banker on Earth absorbed the same lesson that week. A reserve held in someone else's currency is that someone's promise, and promises can be switched off by decree. A bar in your own vault is no one's promise. The institutions that print the world's money are systematically converting promises into metal. They are doing the very thing their own commentary discourages you from doing. Here is where the history gets almost unfair to the skeptics, because the same governments have shown us, more than once, that metal can be revalued by signature without a single interest rate moving. In 1934, the United States government revalued gold from around $21 to $35 an ounce overnight by decree, a repricing of roughly two-thirds delivered with a pen. In 1971, Washington severed the dollar's link to gold entirely, announced as temporary, never reversed, and the greatest metals decade in modern history followed. In 1985, the major economic powers met at the Plaza Hotel and simply agreed to walk the dollar down. No rate decision required, and gold rose substantially in the years that followed as the currency fell. Understand what those three episodes mean for you. The value of the dollars your retirement is measured in has been adjusted by conference table before, and each time the people holding metal were on the right side of the signature. And the arithmetic that once rescued the dollar is no longer available. It took brutally high interest rates, held with real conviction, rates that punished the entire economy, to finally break the metals fever of the early 1980s. Whether anyone in Washington has that conviction now is beside the point. The math itself has closed the door. Federal interest costs have grown so large they recently outran the entire defense budget, which means every meaningful rate increase now wounds the government's own finances faster than it wounds inflation. A heavily indebted government simply cannot afford the medicine that kills a metals bull market. Add a Federal Reserve under Kevin Warsh that has shown real division in its recent decisions, and you have a policy environment where the historical kill switch for gold and silver is rusted shut. Now, let me be straight with you, because you deserve the caution as much as the case, and a guide who only tells you the sunny half is not a guide. I do not know when the ratio closes, and I will not insult you by pretending I know the season, let alone the day. Silver is the more violent of the two metals, in both directions. A recession that cuts industrial demand can hit silver harder than gold in the short run, and this measurement has stayed stretched for years at a time before it snapped. The market's referees can move the goalposts too. In 2011, exchange officials raised margin requirements in rapid succession, and silver fell roughly 30% in days, while nothing about the physical shortage changed at all. If you own silver, there will be stretches that test your stomach. None of this is personal financial advice, and none of it is a promised outcome. It is a case built on measurements and history, and a case is exactly what it sounds like: strong, and still not a certainty. But notice what every one of those risks has in common. They are all about the timing, and none of them touches the yardstick itself. A margin hike does not create a single new ounce. A recession does not put the silver back in the landfills. A stretched ratio that stays stretched another year is a longer loading period, not a refutation. This is what Dale understood at his kitchen table in Sioux Falls, because it is the same thing he told 3 decades of students staring at a lopsided proportion on the chalkboard. You do not have to know when the equation balances. You only have to know which side of it you would rather be standing on when it does. He could not tell you the date silver closes the gap. He could tell you, with a teacher's certainty, that 15 and 60-something are not both the right answer. There is one more clue, and it is the one I find most persuasive of all: the silence. Think about what the last true silver mania looked like, the one that drove the ratio to 17. Lines wrapped around coin shops in January of 1980. Families melted heirloom flatware. The price gapped higher day after day, and everyone's brother-in-law had become an expert. Now look around you in this stretch. No lines, no melted silverware. Institutional portfolios still carry a historically tiny allocation to metals, a rounding error next to what they held in past cycles. Silver's old ceiling near $50 was touched twice, in 1980 and again in 2011, roughly 31 years apart. And here is the fact that should really settle in. Adjusted for what the dollar has lost since, that first peak sits at a 3-figure silver price that has never been reclaimed in real terms. A market that has recently pushed through its old ceiling while the public stays asleep is not a market near its end. Every mania signature is absent. That absence is your head start. And that is the recognition most people only achieve in hindsight. The reserve managers moved years ago. The commercial interests that actually handle metal have been accumulating through the boredom, while the fast money chases whatever gold headline printed most recently. The pension funds, the retail public, the neighbors at Dale's church supper, they have not arrived yet. And the arithmetic of every past cycle says the largest share of the move happens after they do, in the crowded, obvious, breathless phase, when the case has stopped being a case and become a consensus. By then, the discount you are looking at in this stretch will be a story people tell, not a price anyone can get. The advantage of being early is the only advantage a regular retiree ever really gets over Wall Street, and it expires precisely at the moment it becomes comfortable. So, before I close, here is the practical beat, the plain principles I would want my own family to hear. First, think in portions, never in all or nothing. Metal is a diversification of a lifetime of work, a portion sized so that no shakeout, however ugly, can ever force you to sell at the bottom. Second, favor the real thing over the paper claim, because March of 2020 showed everyone the difference, and the deficit is a story about ounces, not contracts. Third, decide your posture before the volatile day arrives, not during it, because every wealth transfer in metals history has run from the impatient to the prepared, and the losers were rarely wrong about the destination, they were shaken out of the journey. That brings me to the last thing I will ask of you, and it is about more than your own statement balance. What you have built is not just your retirement, it is the ground your children and grandchildren will stand on. And the whole question of this video, the gap between what silver is and what silver is priced at, is really a question about what that inheritance will be measured in when it reaches them. The free Retirement Wealth Protection Guide is how our family helps yours think that through. How American retirees with $100,000 or more in a retirement account diversify a portion of what they have built and what they will one day pass down into physical gold and silver inside the account they already own, without taxes or penalties. And if you have $100,000 or more, and you mention that you watched this full video, my team will set up a free one-on-one educational web conference, a real conversation with no obligation and nothing to buy, from our family to yours. As for why now, there is no deadline, and I will not invent one, but the entire point of everything you just watched is that the quiet stretch, the stretch where silver lags and the gap yawns open and nobody is talking about it, is the only stretch in which being early is even possible. If you are watching this on your TV, just scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to readfamilyguide.com. The men who wrote the Coinage Act priced silver against gold at 15 to 1 because the earth itself suggested it, and no act of Congress ever repealed the geology. Somewhere in Sioux Falls, a retired math teacher checked that proportion twice with a red pen, the way he taught his students to, and quietly moved to the side of the equation that history keeps rewarding. The gap in the title is real, it is confirmed, and it is the biggest version of itself that most owners will ever see. Silver owners are early. The whole record of this measurement says the ones who stay early and stay calm are the ones the snapback pays.